Hey folks, Mangamatt here with the June manga update. Let's see, first up, Toriko Volume 34, which I thoroughly enjoyed this. It really shows a lot of the fun that the Toriko series really puts forth, especially with Toriko and the gang training and learning how to do monkey martial arts, which is pretty fun. I definitely would can't wait to see what the other six, I think the other six kings that they have to fight. I also like that the main antagonists this time around aren't necessarily evil. Like the Monkey King here is not inherently evil. He's just incredibly mischievous, and also the side effect of him being so unbelievably powerful that even his joking play style he can rip whole continents apart if he wanted to, if he ever got like serious. So it's a pretty interesting kind of concept to see Toriko and the gang dealing with someone and something that's just on a completely different kind of thought process that they are. It's a lot of fun, especially with Toriko and the gang and their weird kind of training they have to do, learning how to juggle in this extreme high gravity area. And I especially like the way that it's described how Toriko and the gang get stronger, because again it's complete nonsense. It doesn't really follow any sort of science, but the way it's explained, you actually kind of believe it as you're reading it, and it kind of makes a certain kind of weird sense in a way, and that's really fun. That's a really neat kind of genius when you can explain pseudoscience nonsense and someone can actually get it and figure out kind of what you're talking about. So a lot of fun. I always love Toriko. Let's see, next up, Frankenstein Fran. This is the second omnibus, volumes 3 and 4, with even more hilarious, horrific nonsense to be had with Frankenstein Fran, performing weird surgeries on people to try and make their lives better, or to otherwise try and get something of herself accomplished. Even more interesting, they add a couple of new characters for Frankenstein Fran. One of which is this weird mummy woman, and she just consumes organs, and the whole thing of her is that these extra organs can just stay in her, and so anytime Fran needs like extra organs or body parts to fix or to enhance something, she can just draw on that as sort of like a spare parts bin. And I thought that was kind of a neat, weird, disgusting kind of idea. Again, I highly recommend Frankenstein Fran for anybody that loves those old Tales from the Crypt kind of stories where it always has that kind of twist ending. There's also a lot of like kind of Goosebumps kind of feel in it. It's definitely very much more adult than say Goosebumps was, and there's just some hilarious kind of over the topness, and also it delves into a lot of science and a lot of biology in it, because of course Fran is a doctor slash scientist, so it makes sense, and it's that little level of reality in it that makes it fun, especially when Fran goes into details about things like tumors and programmed cell death, and how she plans to kind of fix that, and how this all plays into some sort of blight against nature that she has planned for that day. So far, this is the first 4 volumes now have been released, and there's only 4 more to go, so definitely can't wait to have that whole set for my reading du jour. Let's see. Next up, Assassination Classroom, Volume 10, which I just recently found out a few weeks ago that Assassination Classroom has actually run its course in the manga form with only 20 volumes, which those of you that have been tuning in to my updates know that while I have been loving Assassination Classroom, even I admit that like this isn't a concept that could necessarily go on for a long-standing shonen manga run. Like Toriko, I get the feeling that Toriko could run as long as the author wants it to. There's nothing about Toriko that doesn't have boundless possibilities in my mind. But something like Assassination Classroom is such a directed and focused plot that 20 or 30 volumes tops was really about all you could have expected from something like this, and 20 volumes really does feel like a really good number for it. There's still plenty of room left for Kuro Sensei to teach his kids even more weird assassination attempts, and actually there's a bit of redemption in this volume with one of the non-classroom classmate assassins who previously was trying to kill Kuro Sensei for a undisclosed unrelated government group, but Kuro Sensei has then now decided to help sort of take him under his wing, as it were, and it's just a lot of fun. I really love reading about all the crazy ideas that the kids come up with to try and kill him, and all the crazy ways that Kuro Sensei himself gets himself out of it, especially the opening chapter in this one, I think, which is them planning on building a giant thing of pudding, and all the level of detail on how to make this giant thing of pudding actually stand without like collapsing under its own weight or getting too hot in the middle and getting disgusting or something. And then of course you have the author who explains at the end of that chapter that he actually went into a lot of detail because he always did want to try and make an absurdly large pile of pudding for himself. And again, it's always those neat little things I like thrown into it. Let's see, next up we get this is one of those ones where I do a whole chunk. This is a previous update. I read the first volume, but then I decided to get the rest of it, and here it is. Kurogane. This is Kurogane volumes 2 through 5, which Kurogane is the story of this swordsman named Jintetsu of Steel, who is a lone swordsman, sword for hire, who was sort of a known mercenary, known killer, and he was mauled by dogs and left for dead until this man comes along to actually rebuild his body with various mechanical parts, and then he gets this sort of weird robotic sword, a sword that essentially has an eyeball in it, and the sword actually acts as a sort of voice box for Jintetsu, and they just go around and fight bad guys and, I don't know, get involved in various kind of shenanigans. It's a very serious kind of series. In fact, it's hard to really say because on the one hand, I'm a big Tezuka fan, and my initial thought was it was going to be something very akin to like Dororo, where in Dororo, however you say it, you had Hyakimaru, who was also likewise a swordsman whose body was mostly made of mechanical parts, and that was primarily due to the fact that his body was actually auctioned off to demons, and through the course of the series, Hyakimaru actually slays the demons that have his stolen body parts, and as he slays them, he regrows those parts of his body back onto himself, and to try and eventually become a completely whole man again. And I thought that's kind of what they were going with Kurogane, with sort of maybe this supernaturally kind of swordsman loner type tale. That is not actually kind of what they do. In fact, aside from Jintetsu being, essentially a robotic samurai, there is practically nothing else in this series that is supernatural or like fictional-ish. Everything else is just straight up like oh, there's a woman and she's being she owes a big debt to like a yakuza, and it's about her trying to get out of that debt and trying to escape to kind of live her own life. Or another story about a guy who's trying to comes across a big ton of money, but the money turns out to be a part of a different mafia, and this leads to a huge mafia gang war as both sides think that the other side took the money, and Jintetsu then just kind of happens to be involved with it and eventually kind of resolves it. And here's the thing: the series is great. I love it, but it's all about kind of how you go into it. If you want some really good sort of period piece kind of samurai stories, like I don't know, or like Samurai Executioner, or Lone Wolf and Cub, where there's a lot of these kind of enthralling sort of period dramas about samurai and that rural Japanese era period. These are great for that. If you're expecting a series where there's going to be a robot samurai that goes around and does all kind of weird sort of battles with, like, I don't know, Frankenstein monsters or demons from the depths of hell or something, there's nothing like that in there. In fact, you could rewrite the whole series and just have Jintetsu be some kind of a mute swordsman, and the whole series could literally remain unchanged for it. It's just one of those things. It's like it's good, but it's not good in the way that it presents itself to be, because you can't describe the series without mentioning that he's a robot samurai, and you can't mention that he's a robot samurai without the person you're describing it to creating their own interpretation of what a series like that would turn out to be. So it's a very odd kind of series to try and pitch to someone. Even like Mushishi like is a lot in the same kind of vein, because it's sort of this loner that's kind of drifting in and out of other people's various problems. But at least in Mushishi, the main focus is always around these fantastical creatures that create problems for people, and Ginko showing up and essentially being the guy that resolves the problems most of the time. Whereas here, there's no focus on the fact that Jintetsu is a machine man at all, other than the fact that they mention that, hey, you've got this weird steel plate face, and he's like, yeah, I got cut really bad and I'm ashamed of it, so I wear this steel mask. It's like the manga goes out of its way to sort of not bring up the fact that their main character is a robot samurai, which is kind of an odd thing. In any case, I know it sounds like I'm trying to bash it, but it is really fun and really good, and I really do recommend it alongside stuff like, I don't know, Rurouni Kenshin and the like. But it's one of those things where it's good for different reasons. Alright, then next up, Food Wars, Volume 12, which features what's his name, Soma, facing off in a three-way battle with the other two guys, Hayama and Kurokiba, in cooking mackerel, which is fairly oily kind of fish, and part of the and the interesting part about this is the fact that Soma, again, he's kind of the everyman, whereas Hayama and Kurokiba both have extraordinary skills in their food preparation, primarily with Kurokiba over here specializing in just seafood, and Hayama over here who specializes in seasonings and spices, and both of whom are really good at picking out good fish, and Soma, can't really tell what a good fish is from a not good fish. So he's playing at a disadvantage against two opponents at once. So this particular resolution is going to be interesting to see exactly how Soma pulls a win out from these other two competitors, or if he doesn't. I don't know. There's no telling what kind of fight he's gonna have with the other guys. And of course, again, as always, they put in some nice little recipes at the end for the various foods that they cook, with what's his face. I think, do they put the recipes in here, or is that saved for? I think they save that actually for when the actual food competition battle thing is actually. No, here we go. You have one thing, Cartoccio, which is a kind of Italian-ish kind of cuisine with a kind of entree dish. Yeah, it's thinly sliced beef filled with oil and mayonnaise, and it's usually an appetizer with raw fish. It's really fun. I love Food Wars. I always get hungry reading it, and it's so much fun. Especially because it's like one of those series where it's kind of like, you read a kung fu story or some kind of supernatural story, and you want to talk about it, but it's like, you can't really talk about something like that without derailing the conversation, or trying to talk to somebody like, hey, ghost something something, and they're all like, I don't really know ghosts, and it's like you can't really kind of talk about what you just read with them or anything. But like, Food Wars, I can talk about like fish or what your favorite kind of fish dish is with somebody, and I'll be talking about maybe kind of stuff that I might have just read from Food Wars, but it's still relatable to them because everybody has an opinion about food. Very few things in life you can talk to anybody about anything about, but food is definitely one of them. Food is something that it doesn't matter who you are, you have some kind of an opinion, you have some kind of a perspective about, or some kind of a yearning to hear about or learn about food. That's anybody, and it's a lot of fun. I really dig it. Let's see. Next up here is, what do we got? Princess Jellyfish Volume 2, which again, this is actually 3 and 4 in it, which I absolutely love this series. Again, it's not often you get a josei title, which is again sort of like shoujo, but like for older women. And in this series, we have what's her name, the Tsukimi, who is sort of this kind of nerdy girl, and she's obsessed with jellyfish. And in the second volume, after the conclusion of the first volume, you'll find out that the hotel that her and her other nerd friends live at is under threat of getting bought out and being replaced with like a condo or some kind of parking lot or something. And coupled with her and the help from Kuranosuke, who's this man who likes to cross-dress as a woman, whose father is a politician, who's kind of involved with the landscape operation, is trying to help them to actually buy the building so they don't have to sell it. And this volume actually, they go into detail about trying to raise money, primarily using Tsukimi's obsession with jellyfish as kind of like a starting off point. Initially, they try to like make little funny stuffed trinkets that are kind of jellyfish shaped, but then actually kind of transition over to what I think is going to be a big focus for this series. We'll see, but primarily making fashion clothing focused around a jellyfish theme. Like the first couple things they make are actually like these skirts and dresses that perfectly mimic the kind of look and design of a certain species of jellyfish. And of course, jellyfish usually have these very long, luxurious kind of frills and these kind of hems to them. So it kind of makes sense in a way that you could be inspired to make fashion around something like a jellyfish. It's certainly not unheard of for fashion to be inspired or related to something from nature. I'm sure there's plenty of animal skins that people have sewn or made from animals, and then usually try to make it look like that animal on a person. So it's interesting. I really love it a lot. It's something different, and I always praise something for being different and being good most of the time. Let's see, next up we have Goodnight Poon Poon Volume 2, which is quickly shaping up to be probably a top contender for favorite manga of the year for me. It has so much character and so much plot in it, and the emotion in it. Right, this volume actually focuses a lot more on Poon Poon's uncle and sort of his personal struggles, while also transitioning back to Poon Poon himself back in middle school, and sort of him dealing with his budding feelings of love for another person in class, and her feelings for someone who is not him, and kind of all that related to it. I've heard online some people say that they would like to see Goodnight Poon Poon actually adapted into an anime, and it's kind of interesting. I've never actually heard or read anything about anything by Inio Asano being adapted into an anime, but the only thing I would say is that Poon Poon just doesn't feel like it's anime good. Like the stuff that happens in Poon Poon is kind of surreal and a little bit too jarring that I really don't know how it could work as an anime. Some stuff I've seen that probably would work well as anime, but like with Poon Poon, especially the fact that, again, Poon Poon's entire family is drawn like these kind of weird stick figure baby chick characters, and everybody else is drawn like a normal person. And of course the whole point of that is so that you yourself feel more related to the characters themselves. By taking away any distinguishing features, it helps you to relate more as the character itself. That's why Charles Schultz's Peanuts characters, the Charlie Brown, has the most non-descriptive features of any of the Peanuts characters. He's literally just a circle with two dots, a nose, and a smiley face. He almost has nothing that discerns him, because you are supposed to immediately identify with Charlie Brown. Or that's why, if you ever read Jeff Smith's Bone, that's why the Bone brothers are always drawn in very simplified caricatures, whereas everybody else in Bone is drawn fairly normally. It's something like that, where it's a very deliberate artistic choice that would immediately turn off a wider audience from being interested. Because of course the first question people would ask is why is he drawn normal instead? Why is he drawn like that instead of normal like everybody else? Without really kind of getting it. And you can't blame people for not getting something when they're not they're not used to seeing that. Like even something like in Peanuts, like even though Charlie Brown is drawn as simply as he is, he doesn't look out of place from anybody else in Peanuts. He definitely looks like he fits in. Whereas in Poon Poon, clearly Poon Poon and his family don't fit with the artistic style of everybody else in the storyline, which is obvious, which is intended for that. But regardless, if you haven't read Poon Poon, I would definitely recommend it. Definitely more so even than a lot of other Inio Asano's stuff. I'm interested to see what Volume 3 has in store. I think Volume 3 is going to be the last one, or I think there's one more. It's either 3 or 4 more volumes of that. But given that Poon Poon in its English release is in these omnibus volumes, I can't tell if that's if it's 2 more volumes, but they're going to be combined into 1 to make 3 or what. So there's that. Alright, then last thing here is something that I've been meaning to get around to checking out. That's been a big deal for a lot of manga readers, and I finally broke down and decided to get all that's come out now for it, and that is Tokyo Ghoul. I usually tend to check out the New York on Anime News Network. Occasionally you'll see the thing for New York Times best-selling manga list, and I always try to at least look at it to see kind of what trends are coming or going, or just to see how many times something that I read pops up on that list. And Tokyo Ghoul, without a doubt, has been on that list for like the last I think like 30 or 40 times, especially Volume 1, with the subsequent volumes all also making their appearances on the list. And also on top of that, finding out that Tokyo Ghoul is only going to be 14 volumes, which then I've also heard that there's also the other spin-off manga series, which I may or may not get into. But the fact that Tokyo Ghoul is only 14 volumes, which horror titles always seem like the ones that they can't and they should not ever be very long-running series, because again, the horror is the suspense, and that's the looming fear of things, and the longer you drag out a series, the less fear and suspense you actually get, because there's only so many times that the main character can get put in peril and then get themselves out of it again before it becomes an old hat trick. And Tokyo Ghoul, so Tokyo Ghoul is the story of Kaneki, who's this kid gets in an accident, and then he gets an organ transplant by a girl who happens to have the same blood type as him, and it turns out this girl is a ghoul, which is, by definition, someone who eats humans. I think a ghoul is technically someone who eats dead humans, whereas a cannibal is someone who hunts and eats like live humans, kind of the difference between like a lion and a vulture. But I may be off on the exact definition of a ghoul. But regardless, that's and the story is about Kaneki, who is then exhibiting symptoms of being a ghoul. He can't eat regular food. He's hungering and obsessing about eating human flesh, and he eventually gets sort of inducted into the world and society of ghouls, with a best friend, a girl named Toka, who herself has made it a big deal for her to try and fit and assimilate herself in normal society as much as possible, while at the same time resisting and actually openly opposing these ghoul investigators who are people that actively hunt down and otherwise oppress ghouls because of the fear that ghouls will run amok and start mass murdering people, which the ghouls in this series, a lot of them do tend to do that. And different regions of Japan are broken up into other sections, and the different sections are run differently, and there's all kinds of turf wars and stuff between ghouls and each other. What do I think of the series? I think it's a really cool series. I always love picking up more horror titles. It feels like there's never enough horror in much of any kind of medium these days, much less good examples of horror in said mediums. Comics and manga being one of them. You don't see much big breakout horror titles always coming out, and Tokyo Ghoul is definitely one of those, especially with kind of how very dark it gets. It does get very dark in a lot of places. This is certainly not shonen. There's definitely not as much lightheartedness in it as a lot of some other series might get. It's definitely for an older audience. The only gripes I would really have with Tokyo Ghoul is that the ghouls apparently in this series have these abilities called kagune, which are these weird kind of growths that come out of this organ inside of a ghoul, and it helps them fight other ghouls and also to eviscerate humans and stuff. And they can be these weird kind of muscular tentacles, or they can be these weird kind of wings, or this weird kind of tail. And there's this whole kind of rock paper scissors about which ones are better than others in certain combat situations, and I don't know, it felt really kind of tacked on. You have a series about sort of undead cannibalistic people, and they also have this other weird supernatural ability to them, and it just felt like this kind of thing where that was definitely something that felt like focus group tested. He had this initial series, and the editor kept pressuring him that he had to put in something shonen like that. The ghouls have to have this weird set of powers that they use to fight each other. I don't know, I would have liked it better if they'd have done something with, the ghouls having, some kind of particular kind of fighting style to them. I don't know, they could still do, kung fu or something, but, something more grounded I would have liked better, instead of, this weird kind of superpower thing they had. But again, that's just me. It would have been, it'd be a different kind of series if it had that, obviously. The only other thing is that it seems like they kind of just whitewash the whole ghouls exist in this world kind of thing. They don't really establish kind of a timeline of when ghouls started showing up on Earth, and then the establishment of these ghoul investigators, and then the progression of time where people just accepted that there are just ghouls in everyday culture. It's definitely better than the stereotype of the whole, we're fighting this secret war that regular people aren't aware of kind of thing. But on the other hand, it's if everybody is aware of this sort of thing, then when did that happen? How did that happen? How long has it been going on like this? Was it some kind of a big uprising and then it quelled down? And I don't know. It seems like he kind of just brushed away a lot of backstory for the kind of world building of this series. But again, those are all, Kaneki doesn't need to know it, and therefore, me, the reader, I don't necessarily need to know it. So there's that, and that's all I got for this manga update. Overall, a really good chunk of series and stuff to check out. So see you next time.